The 2023 annual meetings of the World Bank Group and the International Monetary Fund are wrapping up in Marrakesh, Morocco on Sunday. The focus for this year's meetings has been on ending poverty, exploring solutions for global challenges, including job creation, digital infrastructure, and climate action. Now, joining us from Lagos is Tilewa Adebajo, CEO at CFG Advisory, for more insights on things. Thank you very much for joining us, sir. Now, 5 days of discussions and deliberations in Marrakesh. What are the biggest takeaways, especially for Africa?
Thank you very much. Good evening to you in Nairobi. Well, I think what the World Bank president said is that he's going to outline a new playbook to drive impactful development in Africa. Now, I think they recognize that what they've been doing is not working, and he's saying that the impact of development now should be more inclusive and it should harm the environment less. So there is clearly a paradigm shift in terms of approach to alleviating poverty and development in Africa. And it is this new playbook that they're unveiling that is going to be very sensitive to climate change and to focus on renewables and a green agenda. So we look forward to seeing what this is all about.
Right. And just to follow up on that, because we did hear from the IMF chief talking about wealthy nations contributing more to developing nations. And this was the very same message 50 years ago when they held their meetings here in Africa. We had the same message from the World Bank. So just how much commitment is there to giving that support to the developing countries?
Well, invariably, you see, charity does have to begin at home because the World Bank has done its bit by giving Africa access to its development finance facilities at concessionary rates. So African countries have benefited from taking loans from the World Bank and the IMF at very good concessionary rates. But I think it's important that we begin to look inwards as Africans, because if you take a look at the situation in Europe and in Asia, 70 to 80% of trade in those regions are intra-European or intra-Asian trade. Unfortunately, intra-African trade is less than 20%. So in order for us to see meaningful development, we need to focus on the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. We need to strengthen institutions such as the Afri-Exim Bank, African Finance Corporation, and the African Development Bank to be able to increase the level of intra-African trade from below 20% and take it up to at least 70%. Then we can begin to see some meaningful impact, because a lot of resources of Africa is not staying within Africa. And I think that is the problem.
So there's been protests there against the two lenders by activists to say the policies of the IMF and the World Bank are impoverishing the global south. Are there any indications of how the two institutions are planning to tackle this? Because it's been a huge talking point.
Yes, indeed, it has been invariably. And I think the World Bank president acknowledged that in his speech, that the South has not benefited as much as the rich northern countries have. And don't forget that the rich northern countries don't borrow from the IMF or the World Bank. Predominantly, most of the World Bank financing is going towards the South. So we need to question ourselves within Africa, what have we done with the loans that we've gotten from both the World Bank and the IMF? And why do we consistently have debt problems in Africa? If you see, Ghana has defaulted. Nigeria is struggling with 96% of its revenue going towards debt service. So we have these problems. So why do we go into all these fiscal challenges in Africa? And it's time for us to begin to look inwards. We need to reform our fiscal regime in Africa to make it more sustainable for us to be able to achieve meaningful development. And as I said earlier, charity does indeed begin at home. But we need to resist the pressure, because we are not the people contributing to climate change. The northern countries are the ones contributing to climate change, but Africans do not have to pay for that. And we don't have to bear the burden of climate change.
So speaking of climate change, we've got COP28 around the corner, and expectations were that discussions around climate financing will generate a lot of interest. Has this been the case?
Yes, indeed. And I think there's that disparity because Africa, for instance, is our footprint around the world in terms of green and pollution is not as high as that of the northern countries. So the northern countries with their wealth are the ones who have a disproportionate amount contributing to climate change. So we do not need to pay for that. And I think that we need to get some reparation in terms of that. And those are the arguments we need to look at in terms of climate finance, in terms of the renewable. So the benefits should come to Africa because we are less impacting the environment than most of the northern countries. I think that is clearly the case.